Clerk will call the roll.
Glenn Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy Charles Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Andy H. Wynn, Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4. Here. Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation today will be delivered by our own Ron Bertel. After the invocation, please remain standing for our pledge.
Thank you. If you all bow with me. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your word. Your word is so kind, and in your word, Psalms 23 says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." Your servant, Pastor Dobbins' uncle, passed away this morning. He was to be with us. And we pray that you'll be with him, comforting him. Your word says your sheep hear your voice. So I pray that you make your voice clear to that family, that you're not against them and they're for them. And that even though we don't understand why people pass, we know it's a way of life. It's a part of life. And you know what's best for all of us. And so we trust in you and all that. We just pray your comfort and peace be on that family at this time. Lord, your word also says that if we turn to you and appeal for rain, that you will send rain from heaven. And so this time we pause and reflect on the need for rain in our community, and we turn back to you and ask you to send the rain because we need it. And we need to be close to you. And we thank you for your promises that you will answer our prayers with the things that we ask for and not things of evil. And finally, your word says that if any lacks knowledge, let him ask, and it will be given. And so as we contemplate the many complex issues of the day, I pray that you would send your wisdom to all parties, those presenting and those deciding, that your will can be revealed in a way that together we can bring about goodness for your people in this place. And I thank you for these servants that have committed to discharge their responsibility that you've given them to be good leaders. And I just pray your continued providence and favor over our county. In Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Ron.
Members of the court, we do not have any agenda announcements this morning.
Okay.
Could I take a point of personal privilege, Judge? The reason that Reverend Kylan Dobbins was not here with us this morning is because he had a death in the family. His mother's brother passed away, and upon hearing of the death, the mother had to be hospitalized. So our prayers are with that family. I've known them for 30 years or more. They're good people, and I appreciate Ron's mention of the fact that God is not against them. Just because rain comes into our lives does not mean God is against us. It just means that we have to hold on to his hand. So let's pray for that family. And in that regard, Judge, we lost a member of the JPS family this week. Dr. Elwyn Grimes, who's the head of Women's Health Services at JPS Hospital, passed away since we last met. And I would ask that we close this meeting in his honor today.
Thank you very much, and I think it's very appropriate. I might also ask, many of you I'm sure saw the news last night, Brazos County lost a constable Brian Bachman, and was killed in action yesterday. And so I might also ask that we close court in honor of him. So with that, we will we'll move on. Commissioner Fick, well, let's see. You have before you the minutes of our regular and special call meeting, regular meeting of August 7th and specially called meeting for budget purposes of August 6th.
Move approval.
Second.
Both.
We have motion and second for both. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioner Fickus, I believe you have a resolution.
I do, and we just need to approve and vote on it. We're going to present it next week. It's a congratulatory resolution for the grand opening of Bedford's Brown Mackie College.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. You have before you the consent agenda. Move for approval.
The consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and second to approve the consent agenda. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Maynes.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to pass one sheet out to the court real quick. Members of the court, the information that I have just passed out relates to the first item under the Administrator's Office. We're requesting that the Commissioners' Court receive and file the proposed effective and rollback tax rate information for Tarrant County government and take no action at this time regarding the proposed tax rate. Let me explain a little bit of what I just handed out. There was some discussion that we've had at staff level and with court members as it related to if there was a need to sell any additional bonds for this coming year. And I believe that we've done a fairly thorough analysis on that, and at this time we are not recommending that we sell any additional bonds. I do want to make you aware, though, as it relates to the transportation bond package, what we have done and what we're going to need. Basically, through August 12, we've sold $126,700,000 of the $200 million in the bond package. The amount that we have paid out since today, or up to today, is a little over $72 million. The amount that we need to continue our contracts through FY13, now these are projects that we are already in progress, that we're doing the work, that we have contracts to make, is about $40 million, $40.5 million. So that leaves us a subtotal of about $14 million. We know that there are projects that are going to make in FY13 that will have new contracts, and that amount will be about $7.2 million. So even as you take all of those costs and anticipated costs away from the revenues that we have, we still have available about $6.8 million for discretionary projects that each of the commissioners can choose to do. When you look at the interest earnings, just the bottom line, we have about $2.5 million left in interest earnings. We're going to apply that to the Harley Street project. So we have one more payment, which is not going to be due this coming fiscal year, but probably in FY14. So we have adequate funds to continue funding the Harley project. All said and done, we'll be able to go ahead and meet our obligations, and we still have, and it's the last line basically, we still have about $73 million worth of unsold bonds that we can still sell. I remember the Commissioners Court might remember that that this bond package passed by about 73% of the vote. So while we do, and we've also contacted the T because we have this obligation out there to see when they might need their money. We talked to their CFO, and he advises us that they are not going to need us to fund anything during FY13. So our recommendation, and it's all part of item number 1, is that we do not sell any additional debt, and that we take action as indicated in your court communication where we receive and file the proposed effective and rollback tax rate.
I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Court, we can go to item number 2. We're requesting that the Commissioners Court concur with and approve a lease agreement between Tarrant County Hospital District and the Tarrant Regional Auto Crimes Task Force for a sublease of JPS Center at the South Campus, which is a resource connection. It's in Building 2400.
PK, if we do this, will we still need, will they still need that facility out of my maintenance?
Yes, but we are working on a way to basically replace that facility so that it becomes available to your precinct.
This relates to just a portion of the JPS space as a resource.
That's correct. And we've been working with JPS on this particular issue, and quite frankly, it fits very well with their plans and what we're doing also. You might recall that the auto crimes unit was in one location, but that lease is now expired. And so it was the desire of the court to move auto crimes to the resource connection. This worked out really pretty well, so we're requesting approval.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Stidham?
Morning.
Good morning.
This morning, we're asking that the Commissioners Court receive and file the Tarrant County Investment Report for the Treasury funds for the quarter ended June 30th, 2012.
So move.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Gwen?
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
We only have one item for the court. We're asking the court to receive and file the personnel agenda.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Receive and file personnel agenda. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Purchasing. Beecham.
Your Honor, the members of the court, we have 3 items for your consideration this morning. Before we discuss those, I'd like to give you the auction results from Saturday. We had a total auction of $313,845. Tarrant County's portion was $260,470. The weather broke. It was not too hot. I want to thank Commissioner Johnson again for hosting that function again, and we'll do it again soon. Our first item is a bid award recommendation for bid 2012-131 for the Civil Court Sub-Basement Transformer Vault. Recommendation will be to award the low bidder, Scott Tucker Construction Company, the amount of $309,968. If this is approved, we're seeking contract approval and acceptance of the payment and the performance bond.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Our second item is an item in regards to bid number 2012-130. This is our annual contract for janitorial services. We're asking the court to reject all bids and allow us to rebid with revised specifications. 2 issues that did occur. 12 out of the 14 vendors that responded, we would have had to bring back and recommend rejection, and the bid would be 13 in, was about $292,000 more expensive than the other folks.
I move to reject all bids.
And rebid?
Yes, sir.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes. I've got a problem with this, as you know. We've got companies that are performing this work now, have been performing it for several years. And because of the way that the RFP was written for rebid, for renewal of the contract, they were suddenly deemed not to be financially capable of performing the work that they're already performing. That makes no sense to me. Secondly, by rebidding this contract. We have already exposed the numbers of those firms that have responded to the RFP to all of their competitors. So I don't know how on earth you're going to reestablish a level playing field by rebidding this contract. Would you speak to that for me, please?
Yes, sir, and there'll probably be a couple of us speaking to it. There were some increased requirements for financial statements. I'll let Ron Bertell discuss that. David Phillips has some comments also. We did change the requirement to a complete audited financial statement, which was different than the last time. We did have some issues with one of the incumbents. Again, one of the reasons for our recommendation for rejection and rebidding is to allow hopefully 12 of the vendors to respond and meet our previous financial requirements.
But we're going back to the way we did it before it was changed. So why change it in the first place?
There were some problems. We had a meeting. I have a copy of a letter whereby one of the incumbent vendors couldn't meet payroll back a couple of years ago. The RFP was written in conjunction with recommendations from the auditor's office and facilities management.
Are we prepaying for these services?
No.
So if we're not prepaying for the services, I mean, I understand that if the company goes down, then we potentially have a problem there, but I don't know what our exposure is to their financial situation if we're not prepaying.
We actually got several phone calls from employees whereby those checks could not be cashed.
Jack, did you say that was a couple of years ago?
Yes, sir.
He did indeed say that.
But it's not in the last year or two? 2 years?
No, I thought, no, it's not.
So why would that even be relevant?
Once again, we followed the advice of, I don't want to blame anybody, but it was a joint effort to put this document on the street, and we felt like it was valid enough to make the change.
And I'd like to speak to that because we did not require an audit. What we said when we were continually asked,
Get over in the microphone.
when we were asked to review the financial requirements for this, we said that in order for it to be meaningful, we needed some sort of assurance that the information that the companies are submitted is valid. And we suggested that that would be an audit or at least some other sort of review. We never required that they provide an audit. That's not my call. That's not my place in this instance. But we did suggest that that would give us more credibility than if you wanted us to review the numbers. But we did not require an audit.
So we ended up with a situation where 8 of the 10 companies that responded to the bid were deemed financially incapable of doing the work. It's ludicrous.
Could I speak to that, please, sir?
Certainly.
The work that we did, because we discussed it among ourselves several times, was the first group that we included were the people who met the bid specs, because the bid was written to require the audit. So we put in the first category the 2 companies that had provided, or the 1 company that had provided the 2 years of audited financial statements. And then we had another company that had provided 1 year of audited financial statements. Then we had everyone else that
one out of New York and 1 out of Florida.
That was not my business. We were simply asked to look at what we were given, the financial statements that we provided. The second group then was we looked at those individuals and we said, okay, out of everyone else, here are those entities that could perform all or part of the work if the requirement was removed related to the audit. And one of the concerns that we have is that because it is a large contract, if you awarded the entire work to any one company, while we're not prepaying, we are paying probably 30 to 60 days down the road, and we don't want to get to a situation where the employees are not being paid. And I don't know, that is, I think, within the last couple of years. So it may or may not be relevant with any one vendor, but we look at it for all of the vendors to make sure we think they have the financial capacity to perform the work. Again, we only look at what we're asked to look at. We don't go and ask to look at any bids, any contracts. We only look at what we're asked to.
But just to make things perfectly clear, we broke this contract up into bid packages several years ago so that we would be able to receive bids from smaller local firms who are able to perform this work.
I guess my question, Renee, I want to ask, you said basically two firms submitted audited financial statements.
Right. One of them for the 2 years.
One for
There
one.
were two that had 2 years.
2 years, okay.
And there was a third that had 1
One,
year,
okay.
and the bid specs required 2 years of audited financial statements.
And then in addition to that, the other ones, so you put them over in one category.
We put them in the category that they met all the requirements and they appeared to have the financial capacity.
And then you took everybody else that submitted. Did they submit at least?
No matter what they submitted, then we looked at what they had submitted. The ones that had submitted something that was not even, we had a review, one company had a review, we had some that had some.
The majority of the others had a review.
Okay.
There were some that were incomplete, that didn't have a complete set of.
They didn't even have a compilation?
And one of them was a compilation.
That had an issue with it being a compilation. And again, a compilation is not much more than a bookkeeper putting together the financial statements. So we tried to take what we had then and look at everything else, and then we came up with that second pot that said these firms appear to have the financial capacity to perform some or all of the
And
work.
that's my next question is, so you looked at the financial statements and made some determination as to whether you felt like they had the financial capacity based upon some criteria that you set up?
Yes.
And what was that criteria?
That there was not negative comments in their financial statements, their working capital, their profit, their debt-to-equity ratio, their current ratios. I mean, we went through what we saw. And the category that we rejected only had the one firm, and that one firm had some very negative information in its compilation, though, talking about it maybe not being a going concern. So that's the only firm that
So this was a compilation done by a CPA firm, and they got into a going concern?
Not in the opinion, but in the footnote. It was in the footnote. So yes, there was information in that one company. That's the only company that we rejected.
And was that company an incumbent?
No, do not believe so.
Okay, so we rejected somebody who was not an incumbent under that scenario. All of the rest you felt like met the...
Capacity for some or all of the work, and that's not my call.
I understand that. I do understand that. I'm just, because first place, they did not meet the requirements of the RFP.
Right. And that's all we could look at was the requirements of the RFP. And again, if you want my office to review these bids, we're more than happy to. But again, we don't come up with what's in the bid specs. We did suggest, again, that certainly we needed something. If it's just the firm submitting their financials, they're not worth a whole lot, as you can understand. Because I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but if a company...
Let's not say they're not worth a whole lot. Let's just say they've not been verified.
They're not worth much for relying on the accuracy from the standpoint, because they have no verification. That's correct. I'm not implying there's anything wrong with the companies. I'm just speaking to the ability to rest assured that the information in the statements is accurate.
Has been looked at it to some degree.
Right.
That's under the CPA's...
Yeah, I understand what y'all do. But we've got responses to this RFP that indicate low bidders on the packages as they were outlined in the bid specifications. We've got a situation where only one non-incumbent firm was disqualified from performing the work. Why are we throwing this out? Why don't we just award the bid?
Well, we made the statement in the bid document.
You only have one firm, it sounds to me like, that would qualify under the RFP.
Two.
Two, because two of them had...
And they were $292,000 higher.
Let me ask the question.
Yeah, but
What's
they
the
shouldn't
total
change
contract?
those
What is
in the first place.
approximately the total contract?
Per annum, it's about 2.3, 2.6, 2.3 per year.
2.6?
2.3,
What does it cost to
2.6,
have
yes,
sir.
an audited statement?
I'm sorry.
What's the cost approximately, you know?
Well, it depends on what kind of firm.
I know, but
You have,
I have no idea.
I would say that you're very likely looking at,
20?
well, 20 to 40. You can, now you'll find firms out there who can do it for 5 to 10. But to do a full-fledged audit and to do a good audit, you're probably looking at a $15,000 to $25,000.
So they got to do that
Renee, am I?
to bid.
You know, I don't think
Right.
about that. I don't really.
Yeah, they got to do that to bid.
Well, just a footnote, one of the firms, I'm not sure about both of them, but, well, I can say both of them. Both the firms that, the two highest bidders from not from around here, both had those done quite some time ago. They didn't do that just for Tarrant County's bid.
Yeah.
But if they've done it 2 years in a row, they're doing it annually. And I understand that, but I mean,
And they're also probably.
speaking from the Retirement Act for CPAs where we love audits and reviews, I would tell you, I don't think an audit is necessary in a situation where we're not
Paying up front.
we're not paying ahead of time. I would suggest to you that a review is getting a little bit, that's may or may not be. I would like at least a compilation from some independent firm, but as Renee said, that's really not saying anything more than I took the numbers that the client gave me and stuck them on a piece of paper and didn't do any look at them. The review at least implies that there was some amount of, yeah, that makes sense, and it looks at it a little bit more. But to do it all, I think you're severely constraining your smaller businesses if you're requiring them to do an audit on an annual basis. And if they haven't done one in the past, to go back and do a 2-year basically means they almost have to go back and do 3 because you got to have a starting place from which to bounce off of. And
Is that part of the bid?
Sir?
Was that part of the bid that they do that?
Yes, sir.
And when you start talking about a 2-year audit, if they've never had one before, now you're talking about probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000 to $50,000 worth of.
I'd like to
Tremendous
withdraw my
overreach
motion.
on the part of the purchasing department and whoever else was involved in putting this together. It disadvantages our local and minority contractors. This is our mess, and it should not be placed upon the firms that are already performing the work as a penalty. We need to go on and look at these bids and award them based upon who made the best bid.
Let me ask a question because I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I'm now going to ask the attorney because we put out an RFP. And so I don't know whether we have the ability to say King's X, we're going to reject all bids and we're going to now say that we're going to change, we're going to keep all the bids, but no longer, we're going to take out the part that says you don't have to, that you have to submit 2 years of audited financials. I also agree with what you're saying. Now everybody's kind of laid their numbers on the table.
Yeah.
So we got a little bit of issue there. Commissioner Fickus has withdrawn his motion, if that's the notes that we're passing. We do have a motion and a second, but I think that
I don't know what Commissioner Johnson's going to do with the second, but I'm going to
If I
withdraw
second,
mine.
I'll withdraw the second.
So I guess the question then comes, I may be hearing wrong, but I think I'm hearing that, is there any way that we could simply take the bids that were submitted, remove the requirement for audit, and then evaluate based upon their bids?
Before they say no, which they will say no, it has an equal impact on every firm that submitted a a response to the RFP. It doesn't advantage one firm over the other to do it that way. Now, y'all go ahead.
Well, you may also have some firms that didn't submit because they knew they weren't going to go through the cost of 2 years of audit. Just jump right in there, Ray.
I discussed this matter with purchasing, and a couple of weeks ago, maybe longer. I don't remember exactly when we discussed it. We changed a requirement that was not a requirement. In prior years, it was not a requirement. It was send us some financial statements, but didn't say we were going to do anything with them, to where it said you must, or you shall, or you have to. And this isn't the forum at this point to change that and then review the bids received on the basis of things you've changed after you've received the bid specs, after you've received the bids. Yes, there will be people who will be upset about having their prices exposed. That's always a risk when we have to rebid things. We do have absolute right to rebid. If you wanted to call this a technicality, I don't think it would pass muster. I think there's usually something. I haven't looked in this bid spec to see if there's a waive technicalities thing in there, but there usually is. But this is not probably a technicality. And so that's a long-winded way of saying what I believe Commissioner Brooks suggested I was going to say in the first place.
Let me ask another question. The bids, these contracts, when are they up for renewal? When do they lapse?
September 30.
And are there extensions onto those if we were to so choose?
We would bring it back to court. We could bring it back to court and ask for an extension. Yes, sir.
For all existing vendors.
Sir?
For all existing vendors.
In this contract, yes.
How many different vendors are performing this work throughout the
There's
county?
like 2 firms, I believe that's right. 2.
So we do have an option of extending the existing contract.
Exactly.
For how long? 6
1
months?
year, 2 years?
We could do
1
that.
year? Quit shaking your head and come on up here.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I won't speak to how long we can extend it. We're in the 5th year of a 5-year contract, and that ends September 30th.
Okay.
So
And
that's,
there were not, so it's not like we had a 3-year contract with 2 1-year renewals. We're at the 5th year and we don't have any.
that's correct.
We don't have renewal option
That's correct.
right now.
Let me give you a kind of a 15,000-foot flyby. Our current contract's about $2.3 million annually, and if we were to go with any of these firms, specifically if we decided to not reject and go with the 2 firms that provided the audited financial statements, that's about $12 million over 5 years. Also, those 2 firms would be $81,000 over the budget that you approved for my department last week. So I do not recommend that we go with the 2 firms, one from Florida or one from New York.
Let me ask the district attorney's office, is there any prohibition to extending the existing contracts for 1 year?
Without having looked at exactly what we've got with these people, I'm not certain. I suspect we can extend it for some period of time.
I move that we extend the existing contract.
Whoa. Here's the problem that I didn't mention. If you look at the actual agenda item we have here, the actual agenda item, you don't have the ability to extend anything based on the agenda item you have here. What you have on the agenda item is reject all bids, rebid with revised specifications. That's actually what you have on the agenda. So your agenda item is pretty restrictive. I'm sorry to interrupt, but your agenda item is pretty restrictive to do things like extend.
What I would suggest that we do at this time is that we don't take any action on this item, that y'all explore what alternatives we may have with regard to the existing contracts and what options we may have with regards to continuing, maybe on a month-by-month basis until such time as we can go through a process that may be a year or less. But just come back to us. We've got a little bit of time. You said it goes through the end of September.
Yes.
Will we continue paying if we do it this way?
As long as the district attorney's office represents that what we've done is in accordance with any statutes, then yes.
Go forth.
If we did it this way, would we continue to pay them for the services they render?
Well, I still don't know the answer to that question because I haven't looked at exactly what they've got, but it sounds like what we have is a 5-year contract that's triggered off the fiscal year, right?
Exactly.
Which starts some other problems if you go beyond that on a month-to-month on an item that should be bid because it exceeds a dollar amount, if I'm not mistaken. So we have to look at some other aspects of this as well.
So y'all, we're not going to take action today, and y'all are going to come back with some, after you've had a chance to look at the contract.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Number 3 item, we're asking the court to approve an out-of-state interlocal agreement for the purchase of, cooperative purchase of goods and services with the city of Texarkana, Arkansas.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Brooks, I believe you have an interlocal agreement.
Mr. Wright, we good? Thank you, Mr. Wright. I move approval of sections M1 and 2.
City of Crowley.
1, the city of
Crowley. 9N1A and B.
I second.
Yeah, okay. Yes.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Are there any appointments today?
I have 2, actually. Need to reappoint Carolyn Sims to the North Richland Hills TIF Boards 1 and 2.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. You have before you the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Manning.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the Court, we have 4 items we would like to bring to you this morning. The first concerns an update on the Vision North Texas Initiative, North Texas 2050. We have the honor of having Councilman Danny Scarth with us today to make that presentation.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Council.
Morning, Judge, Commissioners. It's an honor to be in your court this morning. GK, thank you. Mary Louise, good to see you. It's amazing when I come into this room and all the folks that I see and that we see on a daily basis. It reminds me on what good partners Tarrant County is with this region. Judges, you know, on RTC and the Executive Committee at COG and a lot of those efforts, it is a real team effort for North Texas, and you guys are a major player there. Vision North Texas, and GK, we can move on. We'll move fairly quickly. It involves the 16-county region that most of us have come to be familiar with through our metropolitan planning efforts and transportation. Next slide. It is talking about Vision North Texas is looking at growth in this area and how we got to the place that we are today in terms of the way that our demographics are distributed, and then how we can move forward. And then ultimately what we hope to answer is, what does that mean to you or to the rest of us? So how did we get here? Next slide. There's Dallas about 60 years ago, I think. We can go next. I mean, there's 1950. Looking at Tarrant and Dallas County, I think that was the year, JD, you were first elected. I don't know if you remember that, but
that was before I was born.
The next slide, you can see how it grows. In 1970, you see some dots, and then again there's 1990, and then 2009. If you go back one slide, I'm sorry, Jake. If you look at that, all the red dots and the purple dots, those are the ones later on. So everything that you see out there in red or a dark color has occurred essentially in the last 10 years, 13 now, since that was a 2009 slide. But and then here's the North Texas population: a little over 5 million people in 2000. In 2010, now we're over 6.5 million. And there's some things that are really worth noting. You see how that curve, the big wedge underneath Dallas and Fort Worth, for a long time up through 1950, 1960, there was the major growth as it began was in Fort Worth and Dallas. It's kind of hard to tell from that slide, but if you look from 2000 to 2010, those two lines on Dallas are virtually parallel. They still grow with the region, but they're not growing incrementally compared to the region. The one for Fort Worth, it's got a wedge, but not nearly as much as the rest of it. So let's go to the next slide. Here we are in 1900, all the way to 2010. Look, in 1950, Dallas and Fort Worth both had their largest majorities of the region. And then since 1950, the rest of the region has grown at a much faster pace than the two largest cities, until you get to now, where 70% of folks are not in either Dallas or Fort Worth. Okay, and the Mobility 2030 plan, Judge, you're familiar with this and from being on RTC. We hope to have these slides updated with the 2035 plan soon, but for now it's the 2030 plan. $4.2 billion is what it costs us in congestion every year. Just because we're sitting in highways and not getting to business appointments, we're paying people to be in their car instead of being productive. And that's one of the results of the growth that we've had so far. Next slide. So where are we headed under business as usual? We can go on to the next slide. By 2050, 11.7 million. We heard yesterday morning Dan Kessler, I think he may have actually had a number that was slightly higher than that. And he's from the COG, and he is in charge of doing some of these projections. And he was amazingly confident that we're probably going to be that. That's twice as many people as we have today. Jobs hopefully will follow and track just about as well. Next slide. So the business as usual, it's very difficult to see this on a big slide, but hopefully you'll have an opportunity to go to our website and take a look at a closer level. But when you look at this, you see how the household populations, the densities get less and less and less dense as we go out into the areas. Yet we continue to add people out there. And so every time that you have to build a house half an acre farther than the one it was, you just continue to stretch that infrastructure. Our roads, our water, our sewer, all has to continue to stretch further and further out. Next slide. So what does that mean under business as usual? It means that over 1/3 of our households will live outside the current urban area. We give up a good deal of agricultural land. Impervious surfaces, parking lots, and streets and roads will continue to grow. We recently had to cut back to $71 billion on our transportation-funded transportation in that 2030 plan. But even when we do that, we still have more congestion at the end of $71 billion than we did before. The existing water supplies and electricity, we can predict that we're in pretty good shape probably out to 2050 on water. We're blessed to have one of the best water districts in the entire state. But beyond 2050, we know that we've got to do something different. Now, those are plans that are in place. We're working on it, but we have to continue to do that. By 2030, that congestion cost jumps from $4.2 billion up to $6.6 billion just in wasted time. in this, the other trends that are somewhat disturbing, especially when you look at some of the problems that exist in Europe today, where Italy will have 10 million fewer people 10 years from now than they do today. Germany has a shrinking population, Spain. And the other piece of that here is, you look at school-age children will be a smaller share. We'll have fewer people that are in the workforce age, more seniors, growing from 7 to 13% by 2030. So it becomes fewer people having to make more money to support more infrastructure. And that's a trend that we have to try to do something to kind of help a little bit. Some of those younger folks are looking for transit-oriented, the ones that we call the creative class are looking for ways to be able to live closer, a little more urban environment, and have a way to get around without necessarily being dependent on their suburbans like the rest of us are. So the things that we need in 2030 or even in 2050 will maybe be a little bit different than they are today. Next slide. As this is Don Gatsky, who's the Dean of Architecture at the University of Texas at Arlington. And I need to tell you here, too, that the three partners, essentially the founding sponsors of Vision North Texas, are the University of Texas at Arlington Architecture School, the Urban Land Institute, and the North Central Texas Council of Governments. And so all of us have come together to begin this process. But he says business as usual isn't just unsustainable, that it is dead. Well, I'm not sure that's entirely true, but it certainly may be unsustainable if we can move forward. So how do we do better? I can keep going. And next slide. So that's through this partnership with ULI, the COG, and University of Arlington's. This has been an opportunity for us, one, to create awareness through presentations like this. I've been other places like North Richland Hills and the AIA and different government entities and other groups. The Real Estate Council has seen this presentation. So it's a way to make people aware of what the issues are. It is an opportunity, a forum for discussion about what growth means and how we might do it better. And then it builds support for some of the initiatives that we hope are created through this process. Started back in 2005. Some of you may have participated in this, where we took the little Legos and moved them around on big maps to show what we thought might be a better way to grow, putting jobs and people where we thought would be a good idea. Most of the folks, now granted they were self-selected, I mean they chose to come to this, but over 80% of them thought it was that a preferred growth scenario was better, and most of them thought it was worthwhile. There's one of your former county judges right there. Next slide. The awareness and the dialogue. Here are some slides of other places where we've talked about that. The first milestone was publishing essentially a document that said where we were. It was where some of these numbers came from, that just documented in a comprehensive place transportation, water, ecology, demographics, all of those things for this region. Next slide. The second milestone was one where we identified some futures. What are some different scenarios that we might track in trying to make it a little bit better as we grow? And so we outlined 4 specific ways to look at that. Next slide. These are just 4 concepts for business or for planning. The connected centers, returning money onto the investments you already have in the ground, highlighting green areas so that you could protect the environment, watersheds, rivers and lakes, things like that, and then preserving diverse and distinct communities so that we don't lose the personality of the 41 or whatever cities there are in Tarrant County, and you multiply that times the 16-county area. We want everybody to be able to maintain their uniqueness at the same time to have some common interests. Next one. So then the final thing was the North Texas 2050, which was a fairly extensive document that outlines what we really selected was really a hybrid of all of those other 4 growth patterns that you saw, but highlighting and specifically targeting a return on investment. What do we do as we're encouraging developers, other governments, the federal government, the state government? What do we do to encourage the use of investments that we already have in infrastructure? And in that case, that means getting people to build development where already a street or a road exists. Put them on a highway, put them where we already have sewer and water connections, not building something out where we have to bring all that stuff to you. And then the next slide. This did win an APA award, American Planning Association award. Next slide. Here's the vision statement. You can read that for yourselves, but it just outlines what we would like to see the future look like. And one of the things, and I asked this in one of our meetings, what if we could influence X percent of people who are moving into the Metroplex in the next 50 years, what would we consider being something that was a good accomplishment? In other words, if we got 3%, 10%, 15% of the people to make a different decision about where they live, where they build, how they get to work and back. And the planners and the professionals said, if we just influence 3% of those people, we would make a significant difference on the cost of infrastructure if it was 3 to 5. And if we were at the recent Chamber of Commerce luncheon where we had a speaker, you can see that the vast majority of people, when you ask them, still prefer a traditional suburban environment with a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house on a little bit of ground for their dog and their kid. But there is a 5 to 7% segment of the population that wants to live in a more urban setting. They want to be close to transportation. They want to not have to get in the car and be a little less dependent on that. So to the extent that we can create those opportunities through incentives, through marketing, and just through working with organizations like Vision North Texas to encourage more of those folks to live where we've already built the infrastructure rather than moving to where we're going to have to build it in the future, we save all of ourselves some extra money and some of that congestion. So here's some of the guiding principles. I just highlight a few of those. Some of it is development diversity. We're not saying everything has to look alike. We want it to be efficient. The resource efficiency, again, comes in efficient growth, resource efficiency. And then educational opportunities. Time and again it came up that one of the big stumbling blocks for us in encouraging people to redevelop or move back to the city is some of our urban school districts are still experiencing problems. And it occurs not just in Fort Worth, not just in Dallas, but you're beginning to see some of the same issues in many of the large, what were suburban school districts are now experiencing some of the same issues. We've got to find a better way to educate our kids and make people feel comfortable about living next to that neighborhood school, or they're not going to move back into the city. And then the next slide. So the preferred future is to accommodate it accommodates all of our anticipated growth, offers opportunities for everybody. It doesn't say there's only one way to do it. And then we want to do that. We very specifically did not want to seek to create some other sort of an entity, any kind of an overlay in terms of zoning or land use. We didn't want to encourage draconian rules or growth boundaries or anything like that. We would like to do this through incentives, through education, and through just cooperation like we have here today, of regional cooperation of trying to make a better way to grow. Next slide. So some of the policy areas, we looked at natural areas, rural areas, the inner tier, outer tier, everything that makes up the character of a large urban environment like we have. The preferred diagram, it's a little hard to see because it's small, but when you compare that to the other diagram that came from business as usual, it's a little different. It shows density in some other places, and it collects some things. And we protect some of our watersheds moving forward. The investment areas, obviously the ecosystem, the community character, economy, housing, those things are all things that we've selected for places that we could put incentives or encourage investment. The action package. This is where we get to that part of what does that mean to me? What does that mean to you? In this 2050, we've got some things where we describe incentives. We describe best practices, ways to develop, model ordinances and templates. We've taken some things that cities and counties could adopt in terms of ordinances for development. There's technical assistance, benchmarks, and then the regional collaboration is a big piece of that puzzle. And all these resources are available on our website. Okay, next slide. So progress and results. We will continue to update everybody that's involved in this on what the progress are, what kind of results we are. We have begun the process, and it's a difficult one, but the COG is taking it on, of trying to create some metrics that we can study. There's no way to be able to go forward to 2050 and see exactly how things would be if we don't do anything. But we think that we can predict that based on normal trends today, and then see if we can track some metrics and say, have we made a difference? If we come back and look at it 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, did we develop in a way that was different than we would have if we had not regionally collaborated on creating a more desirable development plan? Next, so status in 2011, there was a work plan that we published, and you can again get that off of the website. Next slide. We can keep going. We've covered that. Next one. Well, this one's we've already talked about. We've got research that we've done, concepts. We can move forward. These are some case studies that also exist. We sent out a call for people to submit case studies. They've all been formatted very similarly, so you can look at this. This is Mockingbird Station in Dallas. The next one I think is Vitruvian in Addison. We can look at that one. I don't know if you've seen Vitruvian Park, but it's a pretty cool development. You can continue. There's South Lake, Commissioner. You're probably familiar with that one. And so what we would like, what we're asking for, I guess, is to consider some of the guiding principles that exist in the Vision 2050. Maybe have some of your folks look at it, run through it, and then give us feedback on what you think are in there and what you think that we could do better as a collaborative forum for this region in terms of moving us to a more preferred growth plan. And then you've heard business as usual is dead. I don't know how many of you know Fernando Costa, but that's Fernando, I think, in his pajamas answering the door. And he says this isn't, it may be death, but this isn't going to be a quick death, is it? So business as usual is not going to die easily. There are still going to be things that we all count on our tax rolls. Somebody goes in and builds a strip center. Most of us know from being in this business for a while that it's probably worth the most today that it gets built and filled up with leases that it ever is going to be, because the value is going to decline as it's no longer the latest, greatest thing. So those traditional sort of low-cost strip centers that we see empty in places like Hurst and Euless and Bedford and Fort Worth that were popular 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that's what we're trying to avoid, is to create things that are more sustainable, developments that people can walk to, can have other uses in them, or just ways that they are more sustainable, don't have to be scraped and rebuilt as the neighborhoods age. Next slide. So that's kind of what is business better than business as usual. And then next slide. So that's where we're headed. It is a very collaborative effort. I appreciate you guys having me here this morning to talk about it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Danny, do you know whether or not, especially along that dark corridor that goes up Central Expressway, have they had a chance yet to, or had enough years go by to really be able to map the growth that has occurred along those and around those stations?
I don't know that there's been as much, how much they've been able to track that yet. I think it's a great case study, because one of the things that is that makes this process difficult is people's propensity to traditionally want to live in a suburban neighborhood. As you know, Dallas has grown at about 0.8% over the last 10 years. Fort Worth grew at about 36%. Now, we're obviously got a lot more green space and spread out a whole lot farther for our population than Dallas is, but people continue to move where they can drive. And so I think as this small segment of population wants to live closer to transit, we'll be able to track that near Dallas and somewhere they have really fully populated their light rail and see how it's working.
Danny, I think where you're headed is probably the right place for us to go, to be redirecting growth toward the central city where the infrastructure already exists. My concern when you do that, however, is that it has a tendency to displace indigenous populations, the folk who have been there.
Gentrification and some of those things.
Gentrification, and has your three organization group in doing this study provided for affordable housing, for instance,
right.
Provided for mixed income, mixed use communities that would tend to provide a place for everybody to live, not just those who want to move back in town from the suburbs because it's cheaper.
Right, absolutely. And I think one of the real concerns has been maintaining the diversity of our population, that workforce housing, that we don't end up in a place where everything within a 6-mile loop of downtown costs $300 a square foot. And so, certainly within all of the projects that the city of Fort Worth would create incentives for, we have, affordable components of that workforce housing that's provided in there. And most of the policies of anyone that I'm aware of does include for creating affordable housing within those redevelopment efforts. I wish today that we thought we would be so successful at encouraging central city redevelopment that we'd run out of space or we'd begin to do that. I don't think that we'll get close to that for years and years because we have so much area that is ripe for redevelopment that it's one of those things we have to be concerned about, certainly cognizant of. When it becomes a real risk, I think we would be happy with some of the results, but we would continue to protect those folks who live in those areas. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Thank you, Danny.
And don't get us wrong. Nobody is suggesting that everybody ought to live in the central city. I'm sorry, GK. Because one of the great things about this side of the Metroplex in particular is that if I want to have 2 acres and a barn and a couple of horses and a Suburban and a trailer and haul that in, I can live in Fort Worth, Texas, and still have that environment. And I don't want to run those people off. And I wouldn't give you back all of the 28,000 jobs that have been created outside of our North Loop either. Those are very important to us. So we're just looking at some very subtle changes that could help take some of the stress off of the infrastructure within the region. Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Danny. Members of the Court, our second item is an update on the MAP program, which is mobilizing for action through planning and partnerships. This is a presentation by Public Health. Ms. Jones is here to address the Court at this time.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Yvette Jones. I'm with the Health Planning and Policy Division at Tarrant County Public Health. And I'm going to provide you with a brief update on the MAP effort that is being led by our health department. MAP stands for, next slide, please. Oh, all right. Thank you.
Just push that button down.
Okay, thank you. MAP stands for Mobilizing for Action Through Planning and Partnerships. It is a community-wide strategic planning process for improving public health. The model that you see, it lists the phases down the center, and it has the assessments around it, which emphasizes the importance of the outcome of the information that will come from those assessments that will drive the entire process. Participation by our local public health system is very critical to the success of this process. As you see by this depiction, that there are several partners and entities that are included, of course all of them are not listed, that are a part of this public health system. And as you look at how we're all connected and we are all responsible for the health of our community, not just public health. The Health Planning and Policy Division, it was responsible for organizing and managing this entire MAP process. And as you see here, phase one was to be able to bring our community partners out, share with them about what MAP is and how it can benefit them, as well as ask them to join us in this effort in making Tarrant County a healthier place. On February 8th, we had Dr. Eduardo Sanchez come and encourage our community partners to be a part of this. And we had, on that day, 30 individuals that actually committed to being a part of our steering committee. So it was quite successful. We were excited. There was lots of positive energy, and everyone was looking forward to what was about to happen in our community. And 2 weeks later, we had our first MAP steering committee meeting held at the health department, and it was very interactive. We had Commissioner Brooks come and attend, and that was exciting to have him there, along with other community partners, to share with us why they were there, what they hoped the outcome would be in this process. We started out with 30 members from our kickoff, and now we are 65 members strong, and many of them are very committed to the process and participating on various levels. We wanted to jumpstart our second phase, which is our visioning phase. We brought down John McKnight, who's with the Asset-Based Community Development Institute, to encourage us to include the community in our visioning process. What he wanted us to do was to make sure that we didn't look at the problems or the needs of our community in order to address their issues, but rather look at their community assets. From that meeting of community partners that we had 88 persons in attendance, we were able to establish a visioning subcommittee. That subcommittee conducted 9 focus groups, at least one in each of the precincts. They developed an online survey, and within a 2-week period, we received 371 survey responses. So we felt that that was outstanding with the short amount of time that that visioning subcommittee had to be able to do that. As you look, you see that one of the survey questions there is, when you think of a healthy Tarrant County for those who live, work, and play here, what 5 things do you think are most important? And the top 2 are listed there: a clean and safe physical environments in neighborhoods, access to affordable health services, which include dental, public health, and prevention programs. The Visioning Subcommittee took this information and they worked with the MAP Steering Committee to develop a visioning statement at the top. You'll see it's empowered people living healthy in a vibrant and safe community. And this statement is necessary as we move forward throughout this process. As I mentioned before, the 4 assessments and the information that is gathered is what will drive this entire process. And what we're going to do is I'm going to move you through what some of the subcommittees have been working on lately. The local public health system assessment, it looks at and measures the capacity and performance of the local public health system as it relates to the essential public health services and how it's delivering. This subcommittee conducted an all-day retreat where we have 51 community partners attend, and we had great participation, and some of the participants were from representatives from the court, and we were very thankful for that. This assessment utilizes a survey tool by the community from the Center for Disease Control called the National Public Health Performance Standards Program, and it's an excellent tool. It's very comprehensive for us to be able to assess the gaps in our community. Also on that day, the Community Themes and Strengths Assessment Subcommittee conducted an interactive survey with the participants are there. The goal is to be able to get as much information as we can with the short amount of time that we have to get it in and be as comprehensive as possible. Community Themes and Strengths Assessment, it looks at identifying the themes that are important to the community residents, what's important to them in their area. And it also looks at community assets, which is what John McKnight emphasized when he came and provided that presentation and training to us. This subcommittee has identified 7 areas for which they will conduct listening sessions and photo voice. And the photo voice will actually be conducted by our youth in our community, so we want to make sure that they're involved as well. The Forces of Change assessment, it looks at what will occur or has occurred that will affect our community or the local public health system as a whole. They are planning 5 2-hour brainstorming sessions that will cover political, environmental, social, economic, and technological forces. At those sessions, we'll have experts that will provide information, and the participants there will have an opportunity to look at what threats, what opportunities are affecting the health of the community related to those topics, and that's going to be beneficial to us in the future. The Community Health Status Assessment looks at the health status of our community as well as the quality of life. They have compiled an assessment overview looking at assessments that were conducted by Tarrant County Public Health and other members in our community as well as state and local data. They will be placing that information to look at the gaps, and they want to make sure that this assessment will be as comprehensive as possible. So where are we going? Once the assessments are completed, we will be able to look at the linkages through all 4 of those assessments, and we will be able to identify some of those strategic issues. Once that happens, we will ask the community to come back together again and provide us with some input on prioritizing those issues and formulating goals and strategies. And we hope that you will be able to participate in that process. Once that is completed, the MAP Steering Committee will then create an action plan. They will implement it and they will evaluate. They will take those findings and they will complete and develop a finalized community health improvement plan for Tarrant County. So this is what the MAP effort is all about. We are very appreciative for your support in this process as we move towards a healthier Tarrant County. And if you would like for us to come and speak to you, either Lou Brewer or myself, to provide you with more information about the progress of this effort, we would be happy to do so. And you can also go onto the MAP webpage on the Tarrant County Public Health website and learn more about our progress. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Just compliments to Yvette for leading a very aggressive and productive process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette.
Members of the Court, we can go to item C. This is an update on the West Nile virus. Ms. Brewer is here to address the Court at this time.
Good morning.
Good morning.
If I might comment on the previous two presentations first. It was very nice to see Councilman Scarth here today. We were very pleased to be the convener for the health research team for Vision North Texas. And you saw one of the guiding principles was healthy communities. That was the result of the work of that group. And also we've been asked to plan a summit for early next spring regarding health, and that'll be a Vision North Texas effort. So we'll keep involving as many of our regional partners in that effort as possible. The second thing is, and Yvette does a very nice job, the second thing about the MAP program is that several of our hospitals are very interested in participating in this effort because that helps them meet their community needs assessment activity for healthcare reform. So we're glad to have them as partners, and that means they don't have to go do a separate one themselves. So this is one time we're not seeing a duplication of effort, so we're glad about that. All right, on to our West Nile virus briefing. Oops. This is a map, of course, of the United States, and it's showing you where the outbreak is occurring across the country. As you can see, some places are not experiencing any cases, any activity, and other places like our area are incredibly busy. This is the most current map as of yesterday of our cases in mosquito pools in Tarrant County. We have 28 cities, the county, and the airport participating in our surveillance program. We have added a few more as the summer has progressed. Most of these participants are doing preventive activities around education and larviciding. 6 of our municipalities are doing some ground spraying, but I would hasten to add that at least 5 of those have been doing that historically most seasons. We know that there are at least 3 other municipalities considering ground spraying. As of yesterday, August 13th, we had 159 cases of West Nile virus in Tarrant County. We are still seeing a very geographically diffuse distribution of the cases. We have some municipalities that are addressing several small targeted areas where cases are occurring. This is just a profile of what our cases are looking like. We are seeing an age range from 3 months to 94 years. The average age is 52 years of age. 58% are male and 42% are female. The onset date ranges from June 6th to August 4th. 2/3 of our cases are West Nile fever. and 1/3 approximately is the more severe form of the neuroinvasive. 50% of our cases have underlying conditions, and we've had 2 associated deaths to date. They both had underlying conditions. One was in their 60s and one was in their 80s. We are still emphasizing prevention.
And when you talk about underlying,
Yeah, they may have chronic diseases, they may have immune compromised situations, or maybe an age situation too. This is interesting information. We're still emphasizing prevention and the 4 Ds. We're finding that the most common outdoor activities are gardening and recreational water activities. We're also finding that 45% of our cases have only been outside less than 2 hours. Now, here's the companion piece to this. The use of insect repellent. 73% of our cases have never used insect repellent. We have a lot of room for improvement with our 4 Ds and our prevention. We've had rain in this area in the last week, and we need to remind everybody that when it rains, we need to go back out with our repellent on, hopefully in the mid part of the day, not dawn or dusk, and empty all of our containers again. We don't want that standing water.
how long does it take that process? I mean, from the time that the water is standing to the time that potentially the lava is there and the mosquito?
5 to 7 days.
So the water, if the water dries up somewhere before day 5, then it's not an issue. I mean, we want to get it, as soon as you see it standing, you want to get rid of it, but it's not like it happens in a 24-hour period.
It's not that fast, no.
And I didn't think it was, but I just wanted to kind of make sure that folks understood that, you know, you don't have to go out
Right away, as soon as
right
it
away
stops
to do it.
raining.
You just need to.
Right. Right.
Since we're focusing as a county on the prevention model, and the use of insect repellent seems to be a key component of that model, have we given any thought to giving away insect repellent?
We have had some discussion with some of the stores that carry repellent and some of the manufacturers. I don't have anything to report to you as of yet, but we have had conversations with both of those groups.
And again,
it would seem to me that low-income people and people on fixed incomes might need some help acquiring insect repellent.
Again, on the DEEP factor, you're looking at least 20% DEEP?
Yes.
And
Yes, and that's clearly marked
on the labels.
Yes. And the other thing we've talked about is the little donuts to put in the water if you can't get rid of it, yes.
And you say it's clearly marked. This weekend, I grabbed 2.
You couldn't, it wasn't there.
And on one of them, here I'll go for my commercial, the Deep Woods Off has 25%. It's pretty clearly on there, it says 25% deep. The other one, I couldn't find the contents and made no indication. Now, finally, on a different one, I found one that said 15%.
Yes, you do have to look for that.
And is that a concern? Now I'm going to talk about small children. Is that in the spray, there's no problem as far as spraying is the amount of deep in there?
Well, you want to be careful not to get it in their face, of course, and all of the things that small children do. So being careful, and I know that there are wipes besides spray that also have the same level of content, so that might be something you want to use with small children. And then wash them off when they come inside is one of the recommendations that I've seen.
Prevention has a lot to do with educational outreach.
Yes.
How are we reaching all these individuals out there? I mean, how do we educate them? How do we proactively provide information to them?
Well, we're certainly relying on our media friends to carry the message. We also have trained about 23 of our Medical Reserve Corps volunteers I have to say, we did let all of our municipalities know they were available to do education and training. They are available, so I would really ask that any groups that would like our volunteers to come out and speak and provide education, we'd be glad to do that. If anybody's doing a door-to-door campaign, we can help with that as well. And if we need more volunteers, we can certainly put the call out to get more. The municipalities are also doing quite a bit themselves. Some of them have done the reverse 911. We put a script out for that a couple of weeks ago, where they're actually calling their residents and giving them the prevention message. Others are doing door hangers or door-to-door or going to civic meetings and talking about it. So there's a lot of effort happening with our municipality partners as well. We've also worked on several flyers. We have a lot of information on our website that's available to anybody who wants to use it. We've also worked on flyers. We're working with the aging groups to get the information out to our senior citizens. We're sending flyers out to our superintendents with the school systems. With school starting, we want to make sure that the athletic directors and the facilities management people are taking into consideration the hours that the kids are outside and that the facility has been checked to make sure there's no standing water there as well. And we're also working with our daycare centers.
What about the school system? Are we leveraging the school system?
That's what I'm saying, is we're getting that information out to the superintendents.
And again, that may be the place for the spray and making sure that they understand how important it is to put that repellent.
That's what the message we'd like to get across. And I know some of the municipalities have already done that with the schools in their area as well.
Is the risk period until the first freeze, or what?
In the past, we've seen, and this is certainly an atypical year, so we'll have to wait and see what happens. We have seen it start to dissipate as the season gets older, as the summer goes by. As we go into fall, we've usually seen a drop-off of cases, but certainly a freeze will help with that. In the past, we've usually stopped our count around November, and we've usually seen it diminish by then. But we'll have to see what happens this year. Any other questions or comments? This is really a coordinated effort. I know there have been other questions out there, and we are continuing to work with all of you, with emergency management, with our municipal partners, in looking at the data that we have available to us and looking at the tools that are available and really deciding on a day-to-day basis what our next steps will be.
I'd just like to reemphasize that, because we do have 41 municipalities in the county, and so we've engaged our emergency management operations because most of those municipalities are covered by some emergency management group. We are working with our city partners. We still are coordinating our efforts with the health authorities of Arlington and the surrounding counties. Tarrant County Public Health serves as the health authority for a majority of the county, but those areas that we don't, we're in at least a weekly contact with those health authorities to coordinate the efforts of trying to combat this issue. We're also working with the cities as it relates to the larvicide. I know there's an issue with larvicide. It's a great way, if we have any type of standing water or slow-moving water, that we can actually kill the larvae that's in the water at the time. So this is an ongoing process, and we'll keep you all informed as new things develop and also the progress we're making.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary, we can go to item D. This is going to be budget-related issues. What we're going to talk about today is our employees. Ms. Worthy is going to make a presentation. At the conclusion of her presentation, I would like to talk to you all a little bit about how we move forward in the next couple of weeks, what we plan to bring to you so that you can understand the timeline that we're operating under. Ms. Worthy.
Yes, and Ange is going to hand you out some sheets of paper I'm going to discuss. As you know, a few weeks ago, a representative from the Law Enforcement Association spoke to you and requested that we reconvene the committee that looked at those types of items. And that committee did meet a few weeks ago and with the Law Enforcement Association representatives, and they brought to us some proposals of some recommendations that they have for compensation to the law enforcement employees at Tarrant County. And so the front sheet of the page that I've given, or that Ange has given to you, has cost estimates for the Law Enforcement Association proposals. And they basically proposed 4 requests. The first being one that they want to make an adjustment to the current step structure, and they wanted to increase some of those steps. They wanted us to slot, the recommendation included slotting individuals onto the new step structure, and then in some cases the steps would be changed. Right now they're yearly steps, and in some cases they would move those steps to being 2-year, 3-year, and 5-year incremental steps. And
when you say 2-year, 3-year, and 5-year, what you're saying is someone, when they hit that step, they would stay there for 5 years with no increase whatsoever.
There would be no step increase. That is correct for that period of time. That is correct. So there would be individuals, if we did not do structure adjustments, that might go 5 years without a step increase because they wouldn't be eligible for their next step for 5 years. To implement, we have given you basically a 5-year cost estimate on this, since there would be some individuals that wouldn't get step increases for a 5-year period of time. And the implementation of doing their proposed step structure will be about $4.1, almost $4.2 million, and that would be the slotting of our current employees into their proposed step structure. And then for those individuals that would still be at max, we did include a lump sum for those employees. And over a 5-year period of time, it would be about $9.7 million to use that program.
Robin, let me ask you,
Sure.
let me stop you. That $4.1 million would be the cost for next year's budget, but does that include, or would it be in addition to what you've already plugged in?
It would be in addition to what has been budgeted, or in lieu of what has been budgeted. I think what has been currently budgeted is regular step increases, as we have used them in the past. And in this case, I don't think we would give those step increases. And those step increases are worth about $1.92 million.
So that $1.92 million is not 3%, it's basically reapplying the steps.
As we indicated in our initial presentation, we're not making any recommendations on the award of the merit pool, but it is one or the other. It is either go back to the step increase or it's a structure adjustment when it comes to the law enforcement. It is not in any form or fashion both. So it's one or the other.
I'm going to ask my question again. The number you gave us when we started budget, I thought was about $6.4 million.
That's correct.
And I thought you said that was 3%, and then y'all decide how you're going to send that out.
Correct.
That's different than what she said, because if you reinstitute the step, many of those steps are more than 3%. They're 4, 5% between the steps.
But they're also staggered out throughout the year. And it also depends on what we pick as a start date. Because now, since we've gone several years, and Robin, jump in if I misstate something.
I will.
Now that we've gone several years without step increases, you've got people who have been here for 20 years that's got an April review date, and someone that started 2-3 years ago with an October. So who comes first? The longest longevity person or the newest hired person in reactivating the step process?
Or we reactivate the step, and as it used to be, where you had to do all of the raises before a certain period of time. So everybody's step anniversary now would be the first of the year.
If we do the first of a year, then that would become problematic.
It would have to be January, as we've done previously in that.
If it becomes January as a primary start date, then the 3% pool that's out there will fit one way or the other. whether structure adjustments, it will fit with if we re-implement the step system.
And so the $2 million, basically, we have $2 million with which to reduce the 4.1. So the actual additional increase in our budget, if we were to adopt something like this, would be an additional 2.1 over the $2 million you already have set aside for Sheriff's Department.
I believe that's a correct
I think that's a correct assumption. And of course, these are estimated numbers. And in their proposals, in the way they designed it, they did not design any structure adjustments in those. So those structures would hold pat for whatever period of time. So the second item that they brought to us was certification pay, and we have discussed this previously. Law enforcement has various levels of certification. There's a basic, an intermediate, an advanced, and a master's. And those certifications are based on years of service as well as training and education. And so they are making a proposal that those individuals that have those higher levels of certification, anything above basic, would receive certification pay on a monthly basis. And we've provided for you an estimate of the number of employees that we have at each of those levels. And so there would be a $50 monthly pay for an intermediate, $100 for an advanced, and $150 for masters. And those would not be laid on top of each other. So if I have an advanced and a master's, I wouldn't get $250, I'd get $150. And the estimated cost for that on an annual basis, and obviously this is a stagnant number, is $839,000. So that would be the cost of that proposal. Their third proposal was what we call 20 and out. Under our TCDRS, our current retirement and pension plan, you can meet retirement a variety of ways. You can reach 75 points, which is your chronological age and your continuous years of service. You can have 8 years of vesting and be of, I believe it's age 60, or you can have 30 years in any age. And they are proposing a 20-year in any age out. If we were to do that, and again, we have discussed this in previous years as well, it would add $2.7 million to our unfunded liability, and it would increase our fiscal year 13 rate by 0.2%. Okay? And so that is something that they wanted us to consider. And then their final proposal was for some additional pay, and they had additionally recommended it as a flat amount, and we broke it down into an hourly amount. Those individuals are non-exempt and hourly, and if we were to implement it, it would be much simpler to implement it as an hourly, similar to the way we do our shift pay. These are our individuals, our clerical individuals that work in the confinement area. Primarily, they're our booking clerks, and they are proposing some incentive pay for them of 87 cents an hour. And there's between 6 to 8 of those individuals, and so the cost of that should not exceed about $61,000 should we choose to do that. So those are their recommendations and proposals. And on the opposite side of that piece of paper, I don't know if you have any questions or if you... No? Okay. The opposite side of that page are some proposals that we have put together based on what is included in the budget. I believe the total compensation budget is $6.8 million approximately. And so we have provided 3 options for you to consider for the law enforcement individuals. Option A would be a flat structure adjustment of 3% in our first line there, and you'll see that is that box line indicates what is currently budgeted, the 3%. And so this would be a structure adjustment. There would be no steps. So each of the steps basically would move up by 3%, and those people on those steps would move with them, but they would stay at their same step. So if they're a 51G, they will stay a 51G, and 51G will go up by 3%, and that would be their increase for this next coming year. In addition to that, we gave you some options of more than a 3% increase. As you can see, we gave you a 3.5%, a 3.75%, and a 4%. We've also indicated to you the additional cost that would be over what is currently budgeted. And then in the bottom three, under option A, you'll see that's a split number, a 2.5% and a 3.5%. And what we did with that, we took grade 52 and 51 and 52 and added a 2.5% structure adjustment to that. And then for grade 53s and above, we did a 3.5% structure adjustment. And the reason we did that split is the Sheriff's Department has indicated to us that they're having some recruitment difficulties, primarily in their Deputy Sheriff grade 53 positions. And we have done a kind of a mini survey. As you remember, we have not had our formal compensation study done for the last several years, and so we don't have any formal way to compare our salaries to other entities, but we did make some phone calls to some local municipalities and some of the major counties, and we did find that we are slightly behind the cities. We are about in the middle with the other counties. Now, most of the cities have higher educational, or some of the cities have higher educational requirements than we do have, but they are having some difficulty for recruitment. So this might be a way to address that issue should you all wish to do so. And we have some other options, obviously, all with the 2.5% increase for the 51s and 52s, and ranging from 3.5% to 4% on those grade 53s and above. And then additionally, we have shown you the difference in what it would cost to add this to the budget. Any questions on option A? No? So we'll go to option B. And this is actually implementing step increases. There would be no structure adjustments, so the structures would stay the same. What is a 51G right now would stay a 51G. But if you were at a 51G, then you'd be eligible to go to that next step. Okay? And this is assuming a January 1st effective date. We would continue to do the appraisals on the same cycles as they're done before, based on their current review dates. And so you can see that there is, again, several options. There's a plan 1, 2, and 3 under those. The first one is a 3%, or the step increases and allowing 3% lump sums for those individuals that are maxed out. The plan 2 one is the same step increases and the 3% lump sum, but allow the 53s to increase their hiring rate to a D. Our current hiring rate is step C. Okay? And then Plan 3 is similar in that it would allow a hiring rate of 53E. Now, one of the difficulties with doing this particular method is if next year we do decide to have Hay come back in and do a compensation study, we will have raised that step level of hiring rate, and that might not be their recommendation on how to address that long term, whereas that previous adjustment might not create that problem, or that previous option A. And so this is option B is a step increase option with no structure adjustments. Now, in both of those, you might remember, right, in previous years when we were doing regular step increases, we had increased the hiring rate for our jailers, which are 51s, to a level E. Many years ago, we were having a lot of difficulty recruiting jailers, which we are not now, and we increased that hiring rate to E. And in addition to that, we allowed them after 6 months to go from an E to an F, again for recruitment and retention purposes. Well, if we re-implement the step increases now, having gone so many years without allowing those people to go from E to F, we're going to create quite a log jam with individuals that might have been hired over multiple years, and we really feel like that could create some difficulties for us. So in these options, we have eliminated the E to F option, and so jailers would come in at E and then go a year until they were able to go to F in these options. Okay? And then our option C for the law enforcement employees is to eliminate the step structures completely and put them into a merit process similar to our other employees, whereby they would be evaluated, and then based on their appraisal, those departments would be given a pool of money that they would distribute to their employees based on their appraisals or the methodology that that department chose. In a similar fashion, it would be a 3% merit pool with a range of 0 to 6% for those employees' increases. And those increases would be effective January 1st.
Now, that is something that, though, the sheriff has said that he's not supporting.
That is correct. The sheriff has indicated that this would not be his favorite plan, and that he would not like us to do that. And then below the thick line is just one option that we've given you for the non-law enforcement employees, and that is just to simply reestablish the merit system as we've used before, whereby we would have a 3% pool of money. The raises would be effective January 1st, and it would be a pool of 0 to 6% with a 3% lump sum for those employees that were maxed out. And again, no structure adjustments for the non-law enforcement employees under this option. And I'll be glad to answer any questions I can or see if I can find the answers for you. And
that's something that probably next week or fairly soon we're going to need to reach some sort of a decision about. I mean, if you've got questions now, certainly feel free, or I guess contact Robin.
Do you have input from the sheriff on his employees on this, or?
From the sheriff specifically, or from the law enforcement?
The sheriff's department.
We did brief the sheriff on the proposals that were brought forward by the Law Enforcement Association, as well as discuss some of these other options. As the judge mentioned before, he was not in support of doing away with the step structure completely, and I certainly don't want to speak for the sheriff if he is here, and would welcome letting him come and speak for himself, but based on the meetings with him, that was what he indicated. I think he certainly, as I understood it, I was not present in the meeting with the sheriff regarding the E to F. I think in a perfect world he would prefer to keep that, but I think he understood our recommendations for eliminating that. And I'm sure Tina will speak up if I misspeak on any of that. And as with regard to the Law Enforcement Association, who I guess, I'm sorry?
No, I guess my only question is, do you know if he plans to come down and make a recommendation for his employees?
Typically, he has not. I know sometimes the court has asked him when we were making our presentations if he had any comments, but typically he has not made a presentation regarding the recommendations of the Sheriff's Department from the perspective only of the Sheriff's Department. Certainly the Law Enforcement Association group does come and provide us with proposals and have spoken to the court in the past on occasion based on their recommendations and proposals.
And Commissioner Fickus, on the law enforcement group, the Sheriff's Department has a senior officer, a deputy chief that is on that committee. So those discussions his office has been aware of.
Okay, thanks.
I have one question.
Sure.
I'm new here at the county, and I'm trying to understand the basis that we are making for distinguishing the difference between law enforcement employees and others. Do we have a policy countywide that spell out the specific differences in duties between those two groups of employees?
I wouldn't say we specifically have a policy. Those individuals that are designated as law enforcement are those individuals that are required to have jailer certification or peace officer certification, and those are the positions that are assigned to the law enforcement structure. We have multiple salary structures. We have an exempt structure, a non-exempt, a craft, and a variety of ones. But for those positions that are assigned to the law enforcement structure, it's for positions that require either a jailer certification or a peace officer certification. So there are clerical people that work in a constable's office or the sheriff's department that aren't in the law enforcement structure. So it really is differentiated in that manner.
I think the only people that don't fit that definition might be dispatch. They don't really have either certification.
That you may be correct on that.
I'm off, I'm sorry. Dispatchers probably
You're
don't
correct.
fit either one of those definitions, but they are in the law enforcement structure. Now, there is another certification that they're required to have.
I think, Commissioner Wynn, if I could more directly answer your question, several years ago, probably, and don't ask me how far back, but the Commissioners Court made a determination that law enforcement personnel would be on a step system and non-law enforcement personnel would be on a merit system, a pay for performance. And it has always been the policy of this court to treat those individuals equally, not to provide extra money for one group or the other. I think that probably answers your question a little more direct.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Members of the court, just real quickly on this, we have another 2 weeks before we're in the following 2 weeks, we're going to bring other budget-related issues to you, and obviously we'll keep this on the agenda for your review and comments also. Your Honor, that's all we have at this time.
We have two audience participation forms at this time. The first is Luther Perry. Luther, please come down. Please go ahead and give us your name and address so that clerks can get it in the record.
Well, distinguished gentlemen, Commissioners Court, my name is Luther Perry. I reside at 5228 Blue Valley Court, Fort Worth, Texas, 76112. I'm here this morning just to visit with you. 26 miles to the east of us, we see the Commissioners Court, the battles that they struggle with in terms of addressing community issues, just the infighting that goes on the Commissioners Court. In Tarrant County, we seem to have a better handle in terms of how we address our citizens, the concern that we have for our communities. On February 12th, we met with Judge Whitley in his office, about 15 to 17 members of the Black, Brown, and Tan Caucus group. And we were discussing an issue of employment. And we felt as though we needed to address those issues in private as opposed to publicizing them. Subsequently, we agreed Judge Whitley was going to contact us and get back with us in a timely manner. On April the 2nd, we sent a letter because we had not heard from his office. And the question then becomes, what had we done to make that trust level discomforting for both the members of the community that was represented on that particular day? And consequently, we're here today to make the other commissioners aware of exactly what we met about. We felt as though that we could probably resolve those issues. In addition to that, we also made members of our community available to this Commissioner's Court to participate in your processes of making sure that businesses in our community got ample opportunities to apply for those RFPs, the bid processes, and so forth and so on. In addition to that, we also discussed the possibility of making sure that the Commissioner's Court could have a resource available to them, unlike it had been in previous years. More specifically, we are speaking to an employment issue that you may or may not want to discuss in public. But certainly our intent this morning, and my counterpart will certainly get to the specifics of this issue, but we wanted this Commissioners Court to come to the table to discuss matters with respect to both the community and this Commissioners Court. Make no mistake about it, we come from a variety of opportunities in our community. I served with the Fort Worth Police Department for some 26 years, and I retired. And I worked for probably the best chief that we ever had, and I was his assistant for 16 years until his demise. I also had the distinguished privilege of running against your current sheriff back in 2000. I own my own business. I also have a nonprofit organization that's been very, very instrumental in turning the lives of young people around in terms of a holistic mentoring program. We have a host of other folks. We only brought a couple of folks with us. We did not want to inundate this court with and give them the impression that we were trying to bombard you, but make no mistake about it, we're very clear in terms of we're wanting to address different concerns at different opportunities even to this Commissioner's Court. And so, Judge Whitley, you may want to speak to or you may not want to speak to. I'm familiar with both the process of the city, the county, and the Fort Worth Independent School District as it relates to personnel issues. And so, but what I do want to say is that we came to you honestly. We came to you with great concern. We came to you with hoping that we could have some resolve to those issues. Our choice is not to go to the media to publicize our disagreements or our differences, but rather to come to the table and iron those things out so that it's better for both the community and the fact that we elect you to these positions to serve in the best interests of our community. Thank you very much.
Mr. Perry, again, this is not an agendized item, so the court cannot respond at this point in time to any of the concerns that you have brought up. So because it's not agendized, we could not respond.
Well, then I think, then, Judge Whitley, if nothing else, we deserve the professional courtesy of receiving a letter to identify that particular point of interest that you bring up. But it was you yourself who indicated that you would get back with us in a very timely manner. And because you failed to do so, that's why we're here, because the other commissioners may be totally unaware of the discussion that we had in your office in private.
I would also suggest that maybe you talk a little bit with GK or with our administrator regarding that. And again, remember, it is a juvenile matter. It's not an agendized item here, but it is a juvenile matter that you are referring to. And that basically, again, takes it to a different board because the Commissioner's Court does not oversee juvenile matters.
Well, if you recall, he was present also in the meeting, and that we would also say that we expected either a response from you or Judge Whitley. And because we had no response from either one of you, that's why we're here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next individual is Lee Salvador.
Salvador.
Yeah, please pronounce your name
Lee Salvador.
and your address as you come forward.
My name is Lee Salvador, and I live at 1505 Circle Park Boulevard, 76164. And my affiliation is I'm the representative for LULAC Council 4743, and I'm also a member of the Black, Brown, and Tan Caucus of Tarrant County. And like Brother Luther said, it consists of business, clergy, doctors, lawyers, and community leaders. And a lot of some of them had to leave because they have illness in the family. But I do have some of the people here that are as professional as we all are. And I'd like to go ahead and recognize them that they hung around that long. But I wanted to continue where Mr. Perry left, because I was at the meeting, and the first thing I mentioned to you, that for us to be able to work together, that we could be of some service in boards and commissions. And I volunteered myself, because I had been on boards and commissions with the city, with the Community Development Council, and other areas of interest that represented the neighborhood. The reason I'm here today is because, and I'm going to bring up 6 points of interest that we discussed. Again, we met on February the 2012, and we tried to talk, have a meeting with you and gentlemen, that we wanted to get together and talking about all the other issues, but we did have an issue of concern because we felt that at this point we only had one Hispanic in the staff, and we felt that Richard Gonzalez at this point we wanted him to maintain his Latino presence in the community with the county. So we did discuss that, and then the next point that you discussed with us that we would be getting together with Black, Brown, and Tan Caucus, and that to keep it out of the media, we would have to trust each other, and we stuck to that compromise, and we didn't want to compromise that trust. That the things that happened is that I wanted to emphasize that we hadn't heard from you, and I'm sure that Richard hadn't heard from you. And then we also put an emphasis that the Black and Brown, we formed a caucus because we are the highest minorities that are in Tarrant County at this point. And that's why we're trying to represent the community the way they should be represented at the Commissioner's Court. And one of the emphasis that we made on Mr. Gonzalez was that he was the highest-ranking Latino in juvenile services, and we were all in agreement with that. And he, by having he was a 13-year tenured employee, and he is respected in the Black and Brown community. And he worked 6 years for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram on minority issues. So we try to find out how we can work together and again maintain him as our community leader working with the county. And what we wanted to do is what can happen or what can we do with meetings that we were trying to keep off the record and behind closed doors so we could resolve this employment problem. And it's been 6 months ago since we discussed this, and you did make the comment to Richard personally that you would look at that issue and discuss it with him, and we kind of stepped back and let you all handle it yourself. So we did offer you that respect that we were assuming that you were going to give us too. So we're in a position now that we still want to ask for the respect and let's resolve an issue that needs to be resolved. And I would prefer that we meet behind closed doors with the commissioners and you, and let's see how we can take care of that issue and the other things that we said that we were going to be meeting at least quarterly and talk about the other issues that we had in the community that had been brought to us, but we didn't want to bring it to the media. Now, the media has been approaching us, and especially on the Hispanic side, and I haven't made any kind of comments because we wanted to see if we could resolve things as gentlemen are supposed to do. And I've had a lot of issues I've dealt with the council, the school board, and all that, but we have always handled them without limelight. We're not looking for the limelight. We're just looking at working together, and let's see how we can resolve these issues and make sure that the community is represented equally. And this is what the commissioners are all about. So I'm here to answer any questions, but I'd like for you all, since you mentioned that this is not an action item or an agenda item, If that's what it requires to be an agenda item, then I request that we put it as an agenda item on the next meeting. Or if we want to get together and meet on it, I would prefer that instead of we try to eliminate making it an agenda item. We met and we voted not to make it an agenda item. So that's why we decided to keep it on citizen participation.
Again, because it's not here, we can't talk about it today. It's not on the agenda. We can't discuss it. We'll get with Mr. Manius and we'll see about potentially putting it on future agendas. Again, I will tell you that it is a personnel issue.
Yes.
And in part of that discussion, Richard will have to make the decision that he's willing to, I don't know, we'll have to check with the attorneys, but he'll have to make the decision that he's willing to throw his personnel record open for the public and put it out there. And so that's not something I think that we'll have to talk with the attorneys about putting it on the agenda. But that's one of the, if we're going to get it on the agenda and talk about a personnel issue, then, and we can't meet behind closed doors and talk about this with other folks involved. I mean, we'll either be out here or we won't be. So that's the way they'll have to go.
Well, I understand, and again, we don't have any problem. We want to do this as diplomatic as we can, and then pursue what needs to be done. If the question you mentioned about Mr. Gonzalez, that's a question that you are welcome to ask him, or if he wants to answer the question today, that's up to him. So we will pursue it in that respect. So it's up to you.
I think it would help if all of us knew what we were talking about. I don't have a clue. I'm about as lost right now as I can be.
We're not going to.
No,
we can't discuss this today.
No.
Maybe somebody can clear this up a little bit.
We did bring a chronology of the events concerning Richard Gonzalez, and I brought a copy that y'all can make copies of and give them to the commissioners, and then we can go from there. So
I want to make sure you understand that we have legal requirements that we have to operate under. That's what the judge is referring to.
No, he's explained it very well, and I understand it. I really understand the way he explained it, and I respect that, and we'll work it the most diplomatic way we can. But and I understand what Mr. Johnson is saying, that he doesn't have the black and white in front of him, so we can. We did the research. We have everything done. So if you want to make a copy of the chronology, that's fine with us.
If you'll leave that with Mr. Manius, then he can get a copy wherever he wants.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Mr. Saldivar, the fact is that we cannot meet as an entire court behind closed doors. But as long as there is not a quorum of the court present, then there can be a private meeting. A quorum is 3.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Anything else at this time?
Not at this time, no.
Then we will proceed to closed session to discuss items exempted under sections 551.071, 072, 074, and I'll address the following matters.
Thank you, Your Honor. Under the District Attorney's Office, we have a settlement agreement. They're requesting authorization for the county judge to sign, and in that connection, authorize the county auditor to issue the checks that are described in the settlement agreement without them first appearing on the claims register for approval by the court.
Move approval. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. There being no further business, we're adjourned.